All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MOS Live, to our Live Animals Birds of Prey presentation. My name is Becca. My pronouns are she and her, and today I'm going to be your moderator. So that means I will be fielding any questions and handing them to our Live Animal Care Center staff. If you're joining us on Zoom and would like closed captions, you can click on the closed caption button and click show subtitles. If you're joining us on Facebook, thank you very much for being here. But please know that unfortunately we cannot see any comments or questions at this time. If you're joining us on Zoom and would like to submit any questions at any point, you can do so in the Q&A box. Now, one more thing before we get started. Next week is going to be a special presentation of live animals where you all get to choose what we are going to see. So in a moment, I'm going to launch a poll and you get to vote for one of the animals, and we will end up with either the top 2 or 3 animals in that presentation. We're not going to find out which ones they are today. You'll have to join us again next week. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of a choice in what you want to see, and hopefully it's a little bit fun. So on Zoom, we'll be launching this poll right now, so you all can vote. Take a moment to look at what are the animals are there. We have choices for a hedgehog, a frog, a rabbit, beetle, skink, not skunk. Skink is a type of lizard, and a cave cockroach. So go ahead and take a few seconds to pick what you would like to see, and I'll make sure to write this down so that we know what animals will be appearing next week. All right, so it looks like a little over half of you who are here have voted so far, so we'll give you another maybe 10 seconds to figure out which animal you'd like before we jump into today's show. I will say it does look like we have a very clear front runner here. So it looks like this one animal is definitely going to be appearing next week. All right, so it looks like just about most of you have voted. So I am going to end the poll and not share the results because it'll be a surprise. And we can now get started with the rest of our presentation. So if you'd like to meet our birds of prey, we're about to get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz, Assistant Curator from our Live Animal Center. Helping me out today with the animal handling will be Corey, our invertebrate keeper. And today we're going to talk all about birds of prey. Now, birds of prey happen to be my favorite kind of birds. I mean, think about it. They're pretty awesome. These are birds that are predators. They hunt other animals for their survival. How cool is that? Now, birds of prey tend to have a lot of things in common with one another. Even though they're all different, some characteristics that they share are a really sharp, curved beak. Birds of prey use this curved beak to actually rip up the animals that they're eating. Birds of prey also have really sharp talons. You might think of these as their claws. They are really sharp. Often the talons are the most dangerous part on a bird of prey. Another thing birds of prey tend to have in common is really good vision. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about vision with the birds of prey that we brought to show you today. Some of the vision is a little bit different depending on the kind of bird, but they all tend to have good vision in some capacity. So I think with those quick characteristics out of the way, we're going to introduce our first bird of prey. Now, this bird is called an American kestrel. Now, some of you may not have heard of a kestrel before or haven't heard that term, but I bet you know the exact kind of animal it is. So kestrels belong to a group of birds called falcons. I'm guessing most of you have heard of falcons before. Now, a lot of times when people see different birds of prey, they often confuse them. They wonder, how do you tell the difference between an eagle, a hawk, a falcon? Now, there are some specific things you can look for. Wing shapes are a little bit different, tail shapes are a little bit different, but generally a good indicator is the size of the bird. Eagles like imagine a bald eagle, tend to be really, really large birds of prey. Hawks tend to be kind of more in the medium-sized birds of prey. And then falcons tend to be the smaller of the birds of prey. Now, I know you're getting a pretty good view of our American kestrel right now, but it might be a little difficult to imagine just how small he is. So he's about the size of a robin. So that's a bird you're used to seeing, if you can think of that as a comparison. So American kestrels are a small falcon, and they are actually the smallest falcon you can find here in North America. They're one of the smaller falcons in the world. So this is a full-size bird. Now, American kestrels are native to the New England area. So this is definitely a bird that you can look for out in the wild. Some of you hopefully have been lucky enough to maybe see one before. Now, they do like a lot of habitats that we tend to be in. So this is one you could keep your eyes peeled for. Their preferred habitat is actually open meadows. They really like to have those open fields for their hunting. So that's going to be their favorite habitat, but you might even find them in your own backyard, in parks, places like that, if you are lucky. Now, American kestrels are kind of interesting because they are one of the few birds of prey where you can actually tell the difference between males and females just by looking at them. Some of you probably know that in a lot of birds, ducks, songbirds, the male tends to be more brightly colored than the female. That is true in a lot of those songbirds, ducks, but it does not tend to be the case in birds of prey. The American kestrel is the one exception to that. So you'll notice our kestrel has a lot of bright blue on him, blue on his head, blue on his wings. In a female, the blue might not be quite as vibrant as that, and it's not going to extend all the way down those wings. Also notice the rusty red, that really pretty red on his back and on his chest. The female's not going to have it quite as bright, and her chest is going to be more speckled. So you are looking at a very beautiful male American kestrel. Now, the females, while still pretty, are not quite as brightly colored as the males. So again, kind of unusual to see that in a bird of prey. You don't often see that. Now, falcons in general are known for really amazing flight. Often they're known for really fast flight. Believe it or not, the fastest known animal in the world is a kind of falcon. Some of you may have heard of it before. It's called a peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcons, when they dive, their diving speed can get over 200 miles per hour. That is crazy fast. They are the fastest known animal. American kestrels can't quite brag that they have the fastest speed, but they do have a very interesting way of flying in that they actually hover. So remember I told you they like meadows, that's sort of their preferred habitat. They will often hover and stay in one place above the ground, kind of like a helicopter. This often helps drive up the really fast beating of their wings, may drive up insects and things they might want to hunt. So it's a pretty interesting hunting tactic. So they can't completely brag that they're the fastest of the falcons, but they certainly have that cool hovering ability. Now, American kestrels, like I said, really good predators, and they do in fact hunt a lot of insects, especially in the summertime when insects are everywhere. Then in the winter, maybe it's a little bit harder to find insects. They will find other things to eat. So these birds, even though they are pretty tiny, will take on adult mice, maybe even small chipmunks, snakes, frogs. They're really not too picky, and pretty much anything they find, if it's smaller, they will be willing to go after and try to hunt it and take it down. So I'm going to turn it over and see if we have any questions now, Becca.
Sure, we definitely do. Vivian, age 9, is asking, what is the name, gender, and age of our kestrel here?
So our American Kestrel, his name is Clarence, and it is a male. And we do know that because of the coloration. Again, not typical in a bird of prey to have a color distinction with males and females, but we do see that in American Kestrels. And he is now actually about 10 years old. So he is mature. He is certainly considered an adult. In captivity, they have been known to live into their late teens. I've even heard of them hitting 20. So hopefully he has a nice long life ahead of him.
Awesome. And Lydia, age 5, is noticing that this guy's sort of sitting on Corey's hand. So they're wondering, can this one fly or is it injured?
He actually did have an injury when he was a younger bird. Corey's actually showing it right now. Do you see that wing? It just doesn't quite sit as nicely as the other one against his body. When he was a young bird, he was injured. We don't really know how. Maybe he flew into a car, flew into a window. We're not really sure. He was taken in by someone called a wildlife rehabilitator. That's someone who takes care of injured or orphaned wildlife. So they kind of nursed him back to health, but they noticed during that time that he was not able to fly. That wing, even though it's healed to the best it's ever going to be healed, he does not have flight ability. So obviously, an American kestrel would need to be able to fly in order to survive and find food in the wild. So it was decided that he was going to need to live with people for the rest of his life. So he came here to the museum, and now he has a nice, important job as an ambassador animal. So even though he can't fly, we actually don't want him to potentially fall off Corey's hand and hurt himself around this room. So we do have a couple things that you probably noticed on the bird. So around his leg are leather straps called jesses. That's sort of like his version of a collar. Their legs are the strongest parts of their body, so we put those collars around their legs. Then Corey is also holding a leash, just kind of as an extra precaution. If he did kind of flutter a little bit, move his wings, and maybe fall a little bit off her hand, she at least is holding onto that leash to, again, prevent him from getting hurt if he did move about the room.
All right, so we have a question kind of wondering, well, this question says, does that mean a northern harrier is also considered a falcon because it hovers? And I guess maybe along those lines, what makes a falcon a falcon?
I believe a harrier, I think it's a type of hawk. So not all falcons hover. The American kestrel has that unique ability of being able to hover. Again, you have to look at the specific shape of the wing, shape of the tail, and some genetic similarities that will relate falcons to one another. So there certainly could be other birds that are able to hover. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a falcon. So yes, I'm not as familiar with the harrier, but I believe it's a different kind of bird of prey.
Awesome, thank you. And now we have a question that in another presentation, it was said that rarely do birds have blue feathers. So is this another exception of a bird that does in fact have some blue feathers?
Wow, we have a repeat viewer who saw our blue show. Now, Corey is the expert on the color blue, but this is actually blue. So these feathers are in fact blue. And yes, it is rare, but theirs are, which is, I think, is kind of neat.
I think so too. I thought that was fun. Now we have a few questions kind of about eggs of this bird and sort of the babies. So one person is wondering what's the color and size of their eggs. And another person is wondering how many chicks do they have at once? And are they even called chicks or what would they be called?
I believe you can call them chicks. I actually don't know if there's a more technical term, but baby birds tend to be called chicks. Their eggs are really tiny. So if you guys picture a chicken egg, picture how big a chicken, an adult chicken actually is. So an American kestrel egg would be probably, I would say, about a quarter the size of that. So pretty tiny. And they're kind of off-white, almost like a cream colored. Generally, they don't have too many babies. 2 to 3 seems pretty average in a clutch. Now, the babies are helpless. When they first hatch, most people know that about birds. They really are dependent on their parents to help with pretty much everything for quite a while. Another neat thing about birds of prey, they have to learn to hunt from their parents. So it might be instinct to eat up an animal if it's given to them, but they have to learn those hunting skills. So their parents do teach them that, which I always think is really cool.
Speaking of those hunting skills, we have a lot of people asking, do birds of prey hunt other birds of prey, from Henry, age 5, and a couple other people asking what's his favorite food, and William, age 8, wants to know, what do they eat?
Yes, birds of prey definitely hunt other birds of prey. So bigger ones go after smaller ones. Falcons actually tend to hunt on the wing, so while they're flying. So remember those peregrine falcons that I described with the big, fast diving speed? They often are hunting things that are flying. So maybe other birds, but maybe a smaller bird of prey as well. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
What do they eat in general? I guess maybe even at the museum too.
His favorite food at the museum is actually mice. That is most of what he gets. Corey actually initially tried to give him a little piece, but I think he's too interested in just looking at you guys, looking at his audience for today. But he does mostly eat mice that are already dead here at the museum. He also really likes some insects as treats. So we often give him super worms, which are larvae of beetles, and he really likes those. Sometimes he also gets to hunt live crickets in his enclosure. But again, in the wild, the diet would be more varied, pretty much any small animal they're able to get.
Awesome, thank you. Now I know we still have a few questions, but I think we are just about ready to switch to our next animal. So I'm going to actually share my screen. We have a few facts about our American kestrel here, and hopefully you'll be able to get some of those questions answered that maybe I didn't get to in the amount of time that we had. So feel free to take a screenshot or a picture of this slide, and you can learn a little bit more about our American kestrel as we get ready for our second bird of prey.
I think we are just about ready.
All right, I will stop sharing my screen. Actually, let's go to the next slide. So it's in between.
Now, our next bird could be pretty interesting because this one is going to have the option to fly if she chooses. So you should stay tuned because this could be a pretty interesting show in a little bit. So this next bird, I think, will be pretty recognizable to most of you. I know we talked about hawks, eagles, falcons, kind of looking similar, but most people recognize an owl. And you guys are looking at an owl right now. Actually, an owl in action eating. That was a chunk of dead mouse that you just saw her eat. Now, everyone recognizes an owl. They have those really big forward-facing eyes, really round heads. They are pretty noticeable. Now, this particular owl is called a barn owl. Now, barn owls also do live in this area, much like our American kestrel. Owls in general are going to be a little bit harder to spot because they tend to be nocturnal or active mostly at nighttime, whereas our American kestrel was a daytime predator. Now, barn owls are actually the most widespread of all the owl species. You can actually find them on every single continent with the exception of Antarctica. So I always think that is pretty cool. Now, they get that name barn owl because they actually do tend to roost or have their nests in abandoned barns. Sometimes they'll do abandoned buildings, churches. They really do prefer kind of a closed-in building as the main place where they raise their young. So that is why they are called barn owls. Now, people are usually pretty dazzled and really enjoy our barn owl when they meet her, but that was not always the case. A lot of people were afraid of barn owls. Now, you might look at her and think, why would you be afraid of her? She's so pretty. She's sitting there so nicely. How could you possibly be afraid of this? Well, it has to do with where they have their nests, again, in barns, churches, abandoned buildings. It also has to do with the sounds they make. Now, barn owls do not make very attractive noises. They don't make those nice hoots that you think of when you think of owls, that hooting. That's not the noise this owl makes. You're probably thinking of a great horned owl for a classic hoot. Barn owl noises sound like shrieks or screams. They are pretty scary. Our barn owl actually used to scream quite a bit. She's mellowed a little bit as she's gotten older, but their sound is not very pretty. So imagine this. Owls are most active at night. It's very late at night. Say you're walking by a kind of creepy abandoned building. Suddenly you hear a loud scream, and this bright white thing comes flying out of the building at you. People were terrified of these owls. A common name for them is actually ghost owl, because people were so creeped out by them. We now know that there isn't really a reason to be afraid of owls, or specifically to be afraid of barn owls. They actually do us a favor and are pretty helpful, because they do eat a lot of rodents, which can be pests when they get out of control. So we really should appreciate owls, and most of us do have an appreciation for them these days. Now, with owls come a lot of misconceptions, or kind of things that people have always believed that aren't entirely true. Now, actually, our barn owl is doing a couple of those things right now that often confuse people. And one of those things has to do with their neck. Now, a lot of people believe that an owl can turn its head all the way around and just keep spinning it. Now, no living animal that has a backbone can turn its head all the way around, but they do have a lot of flexibility in their neck. So they can turn their head about 3/4 of the way around, or about 270 degrees if 360 degrees is a full circle. So our barn owl right now is easily looking across her opposite shoulder. She can look completely behind herself and then even a little bit further. She's doing a pretty good demonstration right now, but she's not even showing you the absolute full extent which she can turn that neck. Now, owls have double the bones in their neck that we do. We have 7 neck vertebrae, 7 neck bones. They have 14. So that gives them that great flexibility. Now, the reason owls have this flexibility is that they can't do something with their eyes that we can. So we can actually move our eyes. If we hold our head completely still, you can actually move your eyes up, down, to the sides. You guys can try it right now. Owl eyes are so large, they're actually shaped like light bulbs. If you picture a light bulb that you would screw into a lamp, the smaller part of the light bulb that you'd actually put into the lamp, that is the part of the eye that you can see of the owl. The larger part is actually back in their head. Their eyes are so big, they take up most of their head, and there's no space for muscles. So owls cannot move their eyes. So notice, anytime our barn owl wants to look at something, and she's pretty curious, she hasn't been in this classroom too many times, so she's checking out lots of things. Notice she has to move her entire head every time she does that. But again, to make up for it, they do have that great flexibility. Now, owls do have great vision. Again, they have those huge eyes. They're really good at seeing in low levels of light. Now, they can't see when it's pitch dark. They do need a little bit of light. But to give you an example, we're in a pretty large classroom right now. If we were to turn the lights completely off, make it pitch dark, and take a candle and put it in the middle of the room, our barn owl would be able to navigate the entire room just from that candle. Corey and I would not be as lucky. We'd be crashing into things. We would not be able to see at all. So they can see in very low light levels. All right, so those are a few things about our barn owl. Why don't I turn it over to some questions, Becca?
Sure, we have lots of questions that have come in. A lot of people are wondering what is her name and also age and gender. Well, we said her, so there's that.
It is a female. Her name is Poe. I know I always tease you guys and don't give the names right away, but her name is Poe. And she is actually getting older for a barn owl. In May, she will hit 4 years old. You might think to yourself, that's not very old. And I actually would agree with you. There are some owls that are known to live 30, 40 years. For some reason, barn owls just tend to be on the shorter life expectancy. I have heard of them going up to 10 years, so hopefully Poe makes it that old, but they're not one of the longer lived owls that there are.
Awesome. And people are wondering, where did she come from and maybe how long have we had her?
We have had her since she was 4 weeks old. She looked like a little ball of floofy down feathers. If you guys have ever seen a baby chicken or a chick before, she kind of looks like that. She was either really ugly or really cute, depending on what you thought. We've had her for this May, it will be 4 years. Now, she was actually hand raised by people at a raptor facility down in South Carolina. So she has been with people since the day she hatched. So she's pretty comfortable being with people. Now she's been thinking a few times. We put a perch out there because I told you if she did want the option of flying, we did want to give her that option. She's thought about it a few times. Maybe we'll get a grand finale at some point.
Yeah, I was going to say a few people have asked if we can see her fly, but maybe in time she'll choose to.
Yeah.
So let's see. We have a question here. If an owl is nocturnal, then why is our owl awake?
That's a great question. So in their native habitat, they certainly would be active mostly at nighttime. Since our barn owl is so used to being with people, she was hand raised by people. She's kind of on our schedule. She doesn't want to miss what we're doing during the day when we're in our live animal center. So she tends to be more on our schedule. So awake during the day, and then when we close things down at the end of the day, she probably sleeps for a lot of the night.
Awesome. And Sarah agreed to teachers wondering, what do her eggs look like and how big are they in a barn owl?
So the eggs for the barn owl would be more comparable to like the chicken eggs, maybe even a little bit bigger. And they're a similar kind of off-white, almost cream colored. I've actually never seen one in person, so I can only say what I've seen for pictures. All right, you guys got a pretty good flight. To kind of round things off.
We got to see her, and then she flew out of the camera view.
And then I see if Corey can get back.
Oh, awesome. I think for maybe our last question before we completely run out of time is, how many different kinds of owls are there?
I'm not sure of the exact number of species. That's a good question. That is something I'm going to have to look up. There are lots of different kinds of owls. Here in the New England area, I can easily think of 7 or 8 that are native to this area. But that's a good question. That's something I'm going to have to look up, the exact number of species.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Liz and Corey and Poe here. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so I'm going to share my screen one more time to make sure that we get a little bit of information about our barn owl here in case there were some questions I couldn't get to, that hopefully this will help them. Yeah, thank you, Liz and Corey. Awesome. Feel free to take a picture of this or a screenshot and you'll get a little bit more information about our barn owl here. All right, so I want to thank you all for coming to our presentation today. Again, don't forget to check out next week's presentation because we will reveal what you all chose as our viewer's choice presentation with our animals next week. So if you enjoyed this program and would like to support the museum, you can head to engage.mos.org/welcome. If you want to see any of our other virtual offerings, you can head to mos.org/mos@home, and you'll be able to see any other presentations in the future. So hopefully we can see you all next week, and have a great rest of your Friday.